There are people who love from a distance, who care deeply but cannot stay close, who feel safest when there is space between them and the world, space between them and intimacy, between them and vulnerability, between them and the very connection they long for. They are not cold, they are not indifferent. They are protecting something fragile inside themselves that once broke when someone got too close. Distance for them is not rejection. It is survival. It is the only way they know how to love without losing themselves. The only way to care without being consumed. The only way to stay whole in a world that once taught them that closeness means pain. This is the psychology of people who distance themselves to feel safe. It starts quietly, a text left unanswered for days. A conversation that stays surface level even when the opportunity for depth presents itself. A pattern of canceling plans at the last moment, of being present but somehow unreachable, of showing up but never fully arriving. People who distance themselves are not absent. They are there, but always with one foot out the door. They care, but from behind a wall. They listen, but rarely share. They give, but deflect when someone tries to give back. In relationships, this looks like pulling away after moments of closeness. After a night of vulnerability, they go silent. After intimacy, they create space. After someone says, "I love you," they need time alone. Not because they don't feel it, but because they feel too much. Because closeness triggers something ancient and automatic. A warning system that says, "This is dangerous." In friendships, it looks like being the one who is always a little hard to reach, who shows up for others but never asks for help, who listens to everyone's problems but never shares their own, who is loved by many but truly known by none. In families, it can look like physical distance, moving far away, limiting visits, keeping conversations brief and practical. Or it can be emotional distance while living in the same house, being polite, functional, but never truly open. This is not cruelty. It is not selfishness. It is a protective reflex, a learned strategy, a way of surviving in a world that once taught them that letting people in leads to pain. And for a long time, it works. The distance keeps them safe. It keeps them in control. It prevents the kind of hurt that once shattered them. But it also keeps them alone. And somewhere beneath the walls, there is a loneliness so deep it has no name. The pattern begins early, long before it has a name, long before it becomes a recognizable way of being in the world. It begins in childhood, in the relationships that are supposed to teach safety, the relationships with parents, with caregivers, with the people who are meant to show a child that closeness is good, that needs can be met, that vulnerability does not lead to abandonment. But sometimes those relationships teach something else. Sometimes a parent is emotionally unavailable, present in body but absent in attention. The child reaches for comfort and finds no one there. They cry, and no one comes. They share their feelings and are met with dismissal or distraction. And so they learn, my needs are too much. My emotions are a burden. I am safer when I do not ask. Sometimes a parent is inconsistent. Warm one day, cold the next. Loving in one moment, angry or withdrawn in the next. The child never knows which version they will get. And so, they learn. Closeness is unpredictable. Connection is dangerous. I cannot trust what feels good because it might disappear. Sometimes a parent is intrusive, smothering, unable to let the child have their own thoughts, their own space, their own identity. The child learns that closeness means losing themselves, that love feels like suffocation, that the only way to breathe is to get away. And sometimes a parent leaves, through death, through divorce, through choice. The child experiences the ultimate proof that people you love can disappear, that attachment leads to loss, that it is safer to never let anyone matter that much again. These are not always dramatic events. They do not always look like trauma in the way we typically imagine it. Sometimes it is simply a quiet, chronic absence, a lack of attunement, a childhood where the message, spoken or unspoken, was, "You are safer alone." And the child's nervous system listens, it adapts, it learns, and it carries that lesson into every relationship that follows. In psychology, this is understood through the lens of attachment theory. Developed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, attachment theory explains how early relationships shape the way we connect, or fail to connect, throughout our lives. There are different attachment styles, but the one most relevant here is avoidant attachment. People with avoidant attachment learned early that relying on others is dangerous, that expressing needs leads to rejection, that emotional closeness is uncomfortable, overwhelming, or unsafe. And so, they develop a strategy. Distance. They become self-reliant to an extreme. They learn to meet their own needs, to regulate their own emotions, to function as though they need no one. And in many ways, this works. It allows them to survive environments where dependence was punished or unmet. But the brain does not forget. The nervous system holds the memory. And even in adulthood, even in relationships that are safe, the old programming remains. Neuroscience shows us that the brain's fear center, the amygdala, becomes hyperactive in people with avoidant attachment when faced with emotional intimacy. Closeness does not feel warm, it feels threatening. The body responds as though it is under attack. Heart rate increases, breath becomes shallow. The impulse to flee becomes overwhelming. This is not a conscious decision. It is not a choice. It is the nervous system doing what it was trained to do, protect. And so, they pull away, not because they want to, but because their body is screaming at them to create distance, to regain control, to return to the only state that feels safe, alone. The tragedy is that this protective mechanism, which once saved them, now isolates them. The walls that kept out pain also keep out love. The distance that felt like safety becomes a prison. There is a paradox at the center of this pattern, a contradiction so painful it defines the entire experience. They want connection. They crave it. They feel the loneliness. They see other people in relationships that look warm, secure, easy, and something inside them aches for that. But when they get close to it, when someone offers them exactly what they long for, the terror rises. Closeness feels like losing control, like being swallowed, like disappearing into someone else's needs and forgetting how to exist on their own. So they leave, or they create distance, or they sabotage the relationship in small, subtle ways, picking fights, becoming critical, withdrawing affection, until the other person pulls away first. And then they are alone again. Safe again. In control again. But the loneliness returns, heavier than before, because now they have tasted what it could be like. They have felt the warmth of being seen, being known, being cared for, and they have watched themselves destroy it. This is the cycle: want, fear, retreat, connection, panic, distance, longing, closeness, escape. And beneath it all is a question they cannot answer. Is it possible to be close to someone without losing myself? Is it possible to be loved without being consumed? Is it possible to need someone without being abandoned? The mind says no. The past says no. The body says no. And so they stay behind the wall. watching life happen from a distance, loving people they will never fully let in, wanting what they cannot allow themselves to have. And the exhaustion of this, of always holding back, always staying guarded, always being half present, is immense. It is lonely in a way that is hard to explain, because they are surrounded by people. They have relationships, they have friends, family, maybe even a partner, but no one really knows them. No one sees the parts they keep hidden. No one gets close enough to witness the fear, the shame, the deep, aching need for connection that they have learned to bury so well that even they forget it is there. Until it surfaces, in the middle of the night, in moments of stillness, in the realization that they have spent their whole life protecting themselves from the very thing they need most. Something shifts. It does not happen all at once. It is not a single moment of clarity. It is a slow accumulation of pain, of loneliness, of realizing that the walls they built are no longer protecting them. They are suffocating them. Maybe it comes through a relationship that refuses to go away. Someone who sees through the distance, who stays even when they pull back, who is patient enough to wait outside the walls without trying to tear them down. And for the first time, they begin to wonder, what if this person will not leave? What if this is safe? Maybe it comes through a breakdown, a moment when the loneliness becomes unbearable, when they realize they have pushed away every person who ever tried to love them, and now they are standing in the wreckage of their own self-protection, and they see, finally, that safety has become isolation. Maybe it comes through therapy, through sitting across from someone who helps them trace the pattern back to its origin, who shows them that the fear is not about the present. It is an echo of the past, that the people in their life now are not the people who hurt them then, that the child who learned to survive by distancing is no longer a child, and the adult does not have to keep running. Whatever the catalyst, the realization is the same. I cannot keep living like this. This moment is not triumphant. It is terrifying, because it means facing the very thing they have spent their entire life avoiding. It means staying when every instinct says run. It means letting someone in when the body is screaming that closeness equals danger. It means risking the one thing they have always feared most, being hurt again. But something in them is tired, tired of the walls, tired of the loneliness, tired of watching life from a distance. And for the first time, they begin to consider the possibility that the risk of connection might be worth it. Healing does not mean the fear disappears. It does not mean the impulse to distance suddenly vanishes. It means learning to stay, even when the fear is present. It means building tolerance for closeness, one small moment at a time. It starts with awareness, with recognizing the pattern, with noticing the moment when the urge to pull away arises, not after it has already happened, but in real time, and instead of obeying it automatically, pausing, asking, is this real danger, or is this old fear? It continues with safe relationships, with people who can hold space for the fear without taking it personally, who understand that distance is not rejection, who can be patient while trust is slowly, painfully built. Therapy, particularly with someone trained in attachment work, can become a laboratory for this, a place to practice staying present, expressing needs, tolerating vulnerability in a relationship that will not abandon or overwhelm. It happens in the body, because the nervous system must be retrained through practices like somatic therapy, mindfulness, or simply learning to breathe through the discomfort of closeness. The body must learn, through repeated experience, that intimacy does not lead to annihilation, that it is possible to be close and still exist. That connection does not mean disappearing, and it happens through repetition, through choosing again and again to stay when the instinct is to leave, to speak when the instinct is to hide, to let someone see the parts that have always been kept private. This is not easy. It is some of the hardest work a person can do, because it requires them to face the very thing their entire system was designed to avoid. But slowly, something changes. Closeness begins to feel less terrifying. Vulnerability begins to feel less like exposure and more like relief. Connection begins to feel like something other than a threat. And they begin to discover what they have always feared was impossible, that they can be close to someone and still be themselves, that they can need someone without being consumed, that they can love and be loved without losing everything. Distance was never the problem. It was the solution, the only one available at the time. For the child who learned that closeness meant pain, distance was survival. It was adaptive. It was intelligent. It kept them safe in an environment that was not. And even now, in adulthood, it is not something to be ashamed of. It is not weakness. It is evidence of resilience, of a system that did whatever it took to protect itself. But what once protected can also imprison, and at some point, safety stops being enough. At some point, the loneliness becomes louder than the fear. And that is when the possibility of something else emerges, not recklessness, not the absence of boundaries, but the slow tentative practice of letting someone in, of staying even when it is uncomfortable, of trusting that closeness does not have to mean losing oneself. This is the courage that no one sees, the courage to stay when every fiber of your being is telling you to run, the courage to be vulnerable when vulnerability once meant destruction, the courage to believe that this time, maybe, it will be different. And sometimes it is. Sometimes the person who stays is someone who will not leave. Sometimes the relationship is one where closeness feels safe. Sometimes the risk is worth it. And even when it is not, even when the fear was right and the person does leave, there is something different now. Because they stayed as long as they could. They tried. They let themselves be seen, even briefly, and they survived it. The walls do not have to come down all at once. They do not have to come down at all, if that does not feel right. But maybe, just maybe, a window can be opened. A door can be left unlocked. A space can be made for the possibility that connection does not have to be dangerous, that love does not have to mean losing yourself, that closeness can be a place where you are held, not consumed, and that distance, when it is no longer the only option, becomes a choice rather than a prison. This is not the end of fear. It is the beginning of something else, something quieter, something truer. It is the beginning of learning how to stay. Please like and subscribe for more contents.